Friday of 7th grade, May 24th. Remember, if you make poor choices in here, I'm just going to send you to the hallway or ISR. Like, let's say you continually keep slapping parts of yourself to make a noise.
I'll stop.
I'm going to solve that problem, or if you guys are just generally irritated. Let's see. Posters, we're good to go there, and yeah. Did our pictures. I will send these out on Remind and email to parents and stuff like that. So if you are wanting your picture, you can get to them that way. And see, from there again, before, after 75 points, squares are there if you want them. My yearbook is yonder. Again, if you want me to sign yours, more than happy to. Please put your name on your yearbook. Don't be the kid that gives it to me without a name. I won't make fun of you.
What if it has a name on the white?
Well, that would be having a name on it. Okay. And then, again, if you want to sign mine, it's over yonder, and then you should be good to go there. So, today, I need to finish up yesterday's story, because there was the last part that I did not get to, and then we get to today's part. So we covered that. So, we covered me being in the court and having to go in front of Judge Barr, which, by the way, I don't know if I told this class that he was at my wedding.
Yeah, he was at your wedding.
Didn't tell all of my classes that one, but yes, that was apparently he was really good friends with my wife's family, and so when I saw him there, I'm like, but again, luckily he didn't remember.
Is he still alive?
Honestly, I don't know. I have not stayed in contact. I think so. Anyway, so that first day when I had to go back to school and the kids were awful to me, I did not get the chance to tell you how wrestling went.
Yeah.
I did not get kicked off the team. Should have gotten kicked off the team. My life would have been better if I'd been kicked off the team. But instead, apparently, I got to stay on the team. So this is called a wrestling room. Here at like the junior high, we use the LGI. Put them in there.
So weird.
At the high school level, they have a room that is like dedicated just to wrestling with like padded walls. This is not the one at Noblesville. It was just a random wrestling room I found.
Wait, do we have one?
But we have one at the high school also here. And so, a wrestling room after school. Turns out my wrestling coach was not happy with me whatsoever. Apparently getting arrested looked bad on a team. So after school, after having the whole day of having wrestlers glare at me and apparently having taped things in my locker, I get to practice. And remember, I'm just a wee little 14-year-old freshman that's on the team, and I get in there and immediately everyone's giving me the stink eye. Imagine a room full of male Summers. And when you go in there, they're all awful, and they are just staring at me. I knew it was going to be rough. Called you out. And in there, the coach, whose name was Coach Nuts. This is a picture of my freshman team, by the way.
Where are you?
I'm the skinny little twig over here. Over here is Coach Nuts, who is my wrestling coach. And we get in there, and he's like, apparently, we had someone on our team who made a really poor choice that reflects poorly on our team. And so I've decided to change what we're going to do for practice today to help us work through some of our anger and disappointment we may have. I knew that was not going to go well. He goes, what I think we're going to do today is I think we're going to spend the day doing throwing drills. And if you're not a wrestler, the way throwing drills work is you arm around head, and then you grab arm, and then there's a couple different throws you can do, but you're supposed to just sort of put your hip through and you sort of move them down to the ground, and that's a throwing drill. Now, you can do it dangerously where you can get disqualified, where you put your hip through, and it's like starting a lawnmower, where you're like, woo, and their little feet go flying through the air. And so I was like, all right, throwing drill, I can do that. Little skinny me, I'm going around and trying to find a partner because Coach Knotts is like, find a partner so we can begin. Turns out, none of the kids want to be with me. Even my normal friends, they start to come towards me, and apparently they were given the and they leave. And I go, Coach, I don't think I have a partner. And the coach goes, it's all right, Broviak, I've got a partner for you. And he goes, Laux, you're up. Laux was our heavyweight.
Yeah.
He was a senior, and he weighed 270 pounds, which was just below the 275 that you could weigh in order to be on there. And he was not a fat boy. He was a big boy. And skinny little me, I weighed about 130-some pounds my freshman year, depending on the week. So he was a wee bit bigger than me, and he was a lot angrier and grumpier than me. And so Laux goes, Laux, smash! And he comes over, and he's like, all right, you're my partner. And so he goes first, and he's big, and he grabs my little twig arm, my little twig head, and he does the throw. And I mentioned that you can jump while doing a throw. Well, you can do the whole fast thing. Well, he does it fast and then also jumps at the same time. so that before I hit the ground, his whole weight goes up into the air and then lands on top of me. And I hear like a little hey sound coming from inside of me. And then Laux gets up and he's like, get up! And I'm like, and we repeat this about 10 times. Every time I get up making a little squeaky sound until coach goes, all right, let's go ahead and switch partners. So now it's my turn to throw Laux. So I go over to Laux, which is like going over to a large tree boulder. We've read Princess Bride. Laux and Fezzik, probably came from the same family. And so much like Little Man in Black, I was not nearly as effective. I literally had to sort of jump up because he was not making my life easier. He just sort of stood there. And so I jumped up and got part of my arm around his neck, and I grabbed his big, beefy arm, and then I was like, yeah. And I even did like a little, I jumped up so my booty hit him in the chest. And I started like, and nothing was happening. He was not moving. And I'm like, Coach, I don't think I can throw him. And he looked at me and he goes like, I didn't think about that. Laux, you get to go again. And I was like, son of a gun. And so Laux got to throw whole practice, 2 hours of just being thrown over and over and over again. Finally get to the end of practice. I'm a big boy. I've made it. I'm beat up. Feels like I've been in a car wreck, but I feel strong. And we all come back into this little back corner. This is where we would sit back there and talk. And the coach is like, all right, I think overall that was a pretty good practice. I think we've learned a lot from some of our mistakes and choices we've made in life. But looking around at all of you guys, I can see that you're not done dealing with this issue. And I think you guys probably want to talk amongst yourselves to solve this. And I think it's best if we let you do that. So Coach Powers, other coach, he goes, why don't you and I take off and let these boys solve this problem? And so both the coaches leave.
You're screwed.
So it's just me in this room when all of a sudden all of the upperclassmen just give me the and look at me and I'm like, oh, poopy. And so we had a thing that was called a throwing dummy. And a throwing dummy is like a large stuffed fake person. It was like actual person size, weighed a little over 100 pounds. And it's what you would use if you didn't normally have a throwing partner and your coach didn't hate you. You would get to throw his throwing dummy. So you had like an odd number of people and you could practice with it. Well, they picked me up like you would see movies and pick me up and they carried me over to this throwing dummy that was on the ground and they got out what is called mat tape. Mat tape is what you use to keep these 1,000-pound mats together. It is like super powerful duct tape. And they taped my arms to it, and then taped my legs to it, and then taped my forehead to it. Then they stood it up, and for the next 15 to 20 minutes, they took turns running and jumping into the air and just slamming their body parts into me like you would imagine in a WWE wrestling
That's gotta
match.
be like illegal.
And then they got to the point where when they got tired of hitting me, they started grabbing my all fours and just going through the air and just throwing me into the air. And I was like, ah! And then I would just hit the ground. It was awful. Today, you bet you would probably get a coach fired, but this was back in the 90s. And again, we were like, it's a Tuesday. So, finally, they get done with all of this, and they just throw me into the back corner, upside down, feet in the air, still taped to it, and they turn out the lights, and they leave. And it is just me in this room by myself, upside down, taped to this dummy. And I go, well, life kind of sucks. I guess I kind of deserved all this with my poor choices. And I did not know if a custodian was going to come get me. They definitely were not coming back to get me. There was no way I was getting free myself. I couldn't even reach my mouth over to start chewing on things as they taped my head to it. And I have no idea how long I was in there. I think maybe 20 minutes. Until one of my friends on the team, who was another freshman, he ended up coming in and had a pocket knife back when you could bring those to school. And he ended up cutting me free.
Did you forgive him immediately?
Well, he did not partake. So it was mostly the juniors and seniors. Kids my age, they just left. Except for Chad. But that's the difference.
Darn you, Chad.
I hate Chad.
We can find Chad and bomb his house.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
What's his last name?
That's Chad.
Oh,
Let's
I
kill
hate
Chad.
What's Chad's last name?
Well, the ladies
Oh, he's
like
dead
him.
now.
So, my friend Eric eventually came in and cut me free, and if you may have noticed, I'm part bear. And so if you can imagine having I was less bear after that. Oh, I mean, I was more bare, B-A-R-E. And so it was not pleasant, and he cut me free, and I eventually got changed, went out, my mom was waiting, and she was like, "You're late." And I'm like, "Uh-huh." And she was like, "What happened?" And I'm like, "Wrestling stuff." And so that was how that day ended, and I got through it, and eventually, like, they kept harassing me, and I did not quit the team. I stayed on the team the whole rest of the year. But whenever we had like a wrestling meet or something like that, when everyone else would leave after school to go over to like McDonald's and the CVS, I did not leave. We had a back hallway in Noblesville. If you've been here near the PE area, they have that hallway that has like chairs in it and like the awards and the glass walls. We had something really similar at Noblesville. And whenever we would have a meet and everyone else would leave, I would go to that back hallway and just sit and do homework. And I was like, no one can bother me. I'm sitting by myself. The joy of high school or junior high is like you could just sit in a hallway by yourself and no one would bother you, and it was great. One day, about a month after all of this had happened, I'm sitting in this back hallway by myself and doing homework, and I hear footsteps coming down this hallway that hardly ever got used. It was almost always empty. And they sound like cowboy boots. And I look up to my left, and it was a kid in my grade by the name of Travis. Now, if you guys remember The Outsiders, Tim Shepard, who was like the scary one that had the knife and was all like the one that like tried to get in a fight with Dally and stuff like that. Travis was like our version of Tim Shepard. We were in the same grade in this picture, but he had been held back a couple times, and so he was much older than the rest of us. I remember him getting in trouble in junior high for like smoking, and there were rumors of him getting in a fight with a teacher and stuff like that. He scared the bejesus out of me. And I look over to my left, and I see it's just him walking down this hallway. And he and I had never interacted, so our circles never crossed, and I'm like, shouldn't be a problem. So I'm just going to sit here and do homework, and I'm going to ignore him, and life is going to be good. And I can hear the little feet, and I'm looking down, but like peripheral, I'm like looking up, I'm like watching the feet, and they get right in front of me and stop. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And then all of a sudden, yink, both feet turn to face me. And I'm like still looking down. I'm like, I'm not going to look up. I'm like, you can stand there all you want, but if I don't look at you, nothing's going to happen. And then he goes, aren't you Broviac? And I'm like, oh good, he knows my name. Happy day. So I look up, and I'm looking at him, and he has a neutral expression. So at least he doesn't look angry, he doesn't look happy, he's just like looking at me. And I go, yeah, I'm Broviac. And he goes, didn't you get arrested for shoplifting like a month ago? Like breath spray? And I'm like, oh, good. This kid's going to start in on me now. So this is where my life is gone. But I'm like, you know what? I've been putting up with so much crap. Bring it. So I go, yeah, that was me. I did that. And he goes, huh. And he looks at me for a second, and he gives like this weird smile. And this is one of those things that sit with you for years that I did not expect. And he looks down at me, and he goes, life sucks right now, doesn't it? And I'm like, yeah, it does. And he goes, kids making fun of you? I'm like, yeah, they have been. He goes, when I was in 7th grade, I shoplifted pencils and got caught. And I was like, what? I'm like, that was not where I was expecting this conversation to go. And he goes, yeah, one of the dumbest things I've ever done. My dad beat me for that one. And my friends made fun of me. And I was dumb. And I was like, okay. And he goes, but you know what? People forget about it and they move on. He's like, if you stay strong, people will eventually forget about this. They'll forget about what you did. You'll get through it. And then just turned around and walked away. 48 years I've been alive. It was one of the weirdest interactions I've ever had with this kid who was one of the scariest people I'd ever imagined. And he stopped to give me that advice. And the thing is, his advice was some of the best advice I got because he was right. About a month later, some other kid in my grade did some other dumb thing, and everyone focused on that. And by the time like the next semester started, people had forgotten what I did and had moved on to a new thing. And it was like it faded into the past. And him telling me that stuck with me. And it was the idea that you can be a scary person and still do good things. I don't know. It's one of those things that just stayed with me that I always liked the fact that was my only interaction with him. It wasn't like he and I became friends or interacted like in the hallways. He would still glare at me and I still like ran from him. But that moment was interesting. So That was beginning of freshman year. I then had to get through all the rest of high school without getting in trouble, which sounds easy. But the problem is, I come from a family of alcoholics and drug abusers. And so I'm familiar with how that impacts you. And two of my best friends in junior high, Mike and Mark, who I'd been hanging out with and going to sleepovers with forever, had two older sisters that were like juniors or seniors when we were freshmen, and they started getting invited to these upper class parties. And at the upper class parties, I started hanging out with some of the cool upperclassmen, and they invited me to come along, which I would have happily done, except there was a lot of drinking at this party. And because of what Judge Barr told me, I was freaked out, and I didn't go to the parties. And it was one of those things where our friendship over the course of like that freshman year died. And it wasn't because we didn't like each other, it was just because they started hanging out with other people and I didn't get the chance to hang out with them anymore because I was paranoid about getting in trouble. And so it changed my arc of high school. And that's one of the things I look back on. If I had not gotten in trouble and gotten arrested and been on probation, I absolutely would have gone to those parties when I was a freshman. And I don't know how my life would have turned out because I would not be the same person I am today if I'd gone down that path, which is interesting for me. And so I got through all of high school, never drinking, never getting into drugs. I hung out with people who drank and did drugs. I just didn't go to the parties, but I definitely had friends who did. And so I got to turn 18 my senior year, never getting in trouble. I didn't go to the police to see if they expunged my record. I just assumed, don't get in trouble again, and you're fine. And I'm like, that was my plan. I'm just never going to get arrested again, and I'm never going to have to worry about finding out what happened to my record. And that plan worked great for about 5 months. So I went to IU, down in IU Bloomington. And down at IU Bloomington, I got to bring my car with me, which is really rare at IU Bloomington if you have older siblings to go there. It's not easy to get a car down there. I had to like camp out overnight to get a parking pass for it, and I was all excited. On my dorm floor, where like you all go and live, I was the only person with a car on my entire dorm floor, which was cool because I made a ton of friends. Like anytime someone wanted, I became like an Uber, but I didn't charge people money. I was like, I just charged them friendship. Like we would just like go and hang out. It was like I didn't know anybody. I was a brand new kid at this IU Bloomington, and so they're like, hey, I want to go to the grocery, and I'm like, hey, I'll take you to the grocery, and I would get a chance to talk and hang out. I made a whole bunch of friends because of that. And I even told people, because in college, people tend to drink, and I had a lot of friends who started drinking, and they would invite me, and I'm like, I don't drink. And they're like, you don't drink? And I'm like, when I was 14, I got arrested. And I'm like, I can't drink because of that. And they were cool about it. They were like, oh, we don't care. And so it was never really much of an issue. So this is the car I brought down with me. It was a little sports car I was all excited about. But it only had 2 seats in it. Driver's seat, passenger seat. This was this whole back area. Now, I was a teenage boy. And if you're not aware, sometimes teenage boys are stupid. So what we would do is that we would put people in the back of my car because I told you I was the only one with the car, and sometimes there was a movie we wanted to go see, and we would get 5, 6 people in my car, which is not legal or safe, but again, teenage boy dumb. I would drive, we'd have a passenger there, we'd have a passenger sit in their lap, and then we would just put people like smashed into like groceries, and then like close the little back on it, and it looked like a little fishbowl, people all smashed into it. It was great. And we got into a wreck. The police were like, how does so many people die in this car? But that's how things went. So, freshman year, I made a number of friends. 2 of them, one was called Joshua Fisher. We called him Fish because we're witty. And the other one was a kid named Mo Simmons, Mo. And Mo had a birthday coming up in like November, I want to say, something like that. And they were going to throw him this big party on our dorm floor. And Fish was an interesting guy. If you've ever had a friend that's a little on the scary, crazy side, if you've ever seen there's a TV show like Jackass, Fish was like the embodiment of Jackass. Like whenever we would go to a party and they would have like a swimming pool in the backyard, he was the one that would like jump off the roof of the building. And it's like, yeah! And you're like, he was a lot of fun, but he was also scary. And you're like, dude, you're going to die. He didn't die. And so Fish was when he's like, let's throw this big party for Mo because he has a birthday coming up. And I was like, sounds like a good idea. And he's like, let's make it a beer blast, and we're going to get all this beer that we can. Well, IU is a dry campus, which means you can't have alcohol anywhere on campus, no matter how old you are. Even me, as like a 48-year-old, if I walk around IU with a beer, I would get in trouble for it. Because they're like, no alcohol at all. But Fish, he's not one for rules. And he was like, let's just get as much beer as we can, and we're going to throw a party on our dorm floor. I didn't want to get in trouble. So I'm like, hey, because of my criminal record,
14.
back when I was 14, I was like, I'm not going to come to the party because I don't want to get in trouble for it. And all the guys were like, dude, completely understand, not a problem. I was like, I'll give you money. And I was like, I gave him like 15, 20 bucks. I'm like, here, buy some beer, have fun, say hi to Mo. But I had a date with a girl I had a crush on the night they were going to have a party. And I'm like, I'm going to go to
Is that
this
Riz?
other thing said. I wasn't very rich. Story's not over.
So much Riz.
Yeah, and so I was like, you guys do your thing, I'll do my thing. So Fish starts playing. All of us are 18, so you have to be 21 to buy beer. So Fish finds this guy who's 21. And this guy agrees, who's like this other guy on our dorm floor. He's like, this guy was going to agree to buy beer. Problem was, as we got closer to the day of the party, Fish could not find anyone else who had a car. Because you can't just walk around with the beer, you're going to have to drive around. So Fish comes to see me a few days before the party. And he goes, Brovicast. I'm like, yeah, Fish, what's up? He goes, party coming up in a few days. And I go, I'm not going to be there. And he goes, I know. He goes, I got a problem. I'm like, you've got a problem. I'm like, what's your problem? He goes, I'm not going to be there. He goes, well, I have a guy to buy the beer, this 21-year-old who lives down the way, but I have no car to get there. He goes, so here's my request. Can I borrow your car to go buy the beer?
No bueno.
If you heard my earlier explanation, as soon as he said that, I could imagine like Fish like on two wheels, like taking it around corners, and I'm like, watch me jump this, like going over a cliff. I'm like, so I did a small lie, and I went, oh yeah, my parents don't let anyone drive my car because of insurance things, so I can't. I'm sorry, man, I can't give you my car. He's like, oh well, it doesn't hurt to ask, and I'm like, good luck. Whatever idiot loans you their car. And I was like, didn't think more about it. A couple of days go by. Day before the whole party, he comes back to me. He's like, Brovicast, party's tomorrow. And I'm like, still not going. He goes, I know, but here's my issue. And he pulls out this wad of cash, like more than I'd ever seen. I was like, oh. He's like, I've got all this money to buy beer. And I'm like, okay. He's like, and I've got the guy to buy the beer. I'm like, uh-huh. And he goes, I still don't have a car. And I'm like, you still can't borrow mine. He goes, I know. Here's my plan. He goes, how about instead of me borrowing your car, would you mind driving, and you can take the 21-year-old, and then you guys can go around and buy it, and then you can bring it back. I'd never met this 21-year-old. No idea who this guy was. And I'm like, you want me to drive around illegally with some random creepy old guy that I don't know?
Was it a cop?
No. And so I go, I don't feel comfortable in that whatsoever. He's like, all right, how about this? I have a backup plan. I go, what is it? He goes, you drive, 21-year-old goes to buy the beer, and so that way you're not uncomfortable, I'll sit in the back. And he offered to like sit in this little back area. And I'm like, I don't think that, but he did this guilt trip thing where he's like, if you don't do it, then he's like, we have no way of buying it. The whole party is going to fall apart. We have all these people coming. And he's like, if you do it, then the party's going to actually happen. He's like, you don't have to be there. You just have to drive, and that's it. But if you do it, like, you're going to be the savior of the whole party. And I had just made all these friends, and I didn't want people to think bad about me. And I was like, okay, I'll drive. And so I agreed to drive. But I was nervous, and so we had to wait until it got to be nighttime, and we took off, and me driving, 21-year-old in the passenger seat, and then we just smashed Fish into this little back area, like a fish tank, into this little back area, and we started driving around. Well, in IU Bloomington, to limit how much alcohol you can buy, in each place where you go, you can only buy like 2 to 3 cases of beer, which are these like, same thing as like Mountain Dew or Pepsi, it's like 24, 30 packs. And so the 21-year-old would go in and buy like 2 to 3 of these things, put them in the back of the car where Fish was, and he kept getting less and less room in the back because we kept stuffing more and more things in there. And so like in this little back area, it kept putting in there. And we went to, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 of these different places. Ended up getting hundreds of cans of beer. It was to the point where my car was literally, the back end was like riding down, like on the wheels. And I kept getting more and more nervous because just being in the parking lot of a liquor store, if you're 18, is illegal. In Bloomington, it's like doubly illegal because they're looking for underage drinking. So every time we're driving around, and anytime a cop car saw my car, they'd be like, look at that. There's driving illegality right there. So I kept being like, I said, we have to go home. We have to go home. I can't keep doing this. I'm freaking out. I'm starting to sweat. And eventually he was like, all right, we have enough. Let's go home. So, giant pile of beer with fish smashed into the back, 21-year-old and me, and we finally get a chance to go back to the dorm. I'm drenched in sweat, freaking out about this whole thing. And I'm like, just don't get arrested, don't get arrested, don't get arrested, don't get arrested. And we get back to my dorm, and this is my dorm where I lived, Wilkie, and I had a parking pass for this parking lot right behind the building, which was like super convenient. And I parked like right in this spot, because I remember it was like right across from this little walkway area. But, and I parked with the back of my car open this way, and they planned ahead and brought, do you guys know what hockey bags are?
Yeah.
Like the big giant duffel bags. And they were going to throw all of the beer into these giant duffel bags. And we park and pop open the back, and they're opening it up, and they're opening up like each box and like putting all the beer in there, and I'm like, can we go faster? Can we go faster? Because I'm afraid at any moment we're going to get caught. So I come up with an idea. And I go, hey, to make this go faster, why don't I go up to our dorm floor, and I'll get all the other guys and have them come down, and then that way you aren't carrying two giant bags, and they can all carry like a small bag, like a backpack, and that way it spreads it out. And they're like, you would do that for us? And I'm like, yes, I would do that for you, and it gets me away from the alcohol. And they're like, oh, thank you. I'm like, done. I'm like, you guys keep doing that, I'm gonna go leave. And I'm like, I'm a genius. So I start walking away, because there's a little elevator in the back entrance, and I'm heading down this way, and I get to right about here. It's nighttime on a college campus, so there's people walking around in different directions, and I'm not paying attention to most of them. I'm in a beeline going down that little sidewalk so I can go in the back entrance, and as I'm walking along, I happen to see off to my left, there's like two people in dark clothing like walking over in this direction, and I'm like not paying any attention to them. And as I start going down here, I can see like their path has changed. They're going the same way as I am. I'm assuming they're just going to go down into the same dorm area I am. But as they get closer, they go, hey, hell up a minute, can we talk to you? And I'm like, who are? It's two cops. Oh, just walking along, because that's the kind of luck I have. Just two campus police officers, and I see them and I go, yes, you can. But I don't stop walking. I keep walking towards the dorm, which is farther away from the alcohol, which is that way. And they go, wait up a minute. And I go, I am waiting up. And they go, can we talk to you? I go, you can talk to me. Like, come over. I'm like, you can come right over. And I just keep right on going, because I'm like, the farther we get, the better. And finally they go, hey, stop so we can talk. And I go, smart me. Yes, officers, what would you like to talk about? Nice and loud, hoping that fish and the 21-year-old can hear what I'm saying, because hopefully they can pick up on something. The officers come over and they go, so where are you going? And I go, my dorm? I live right there. And they go, oh. And I go, cool. They're like, did you get a ride here? I'm like, no, I drove. And they go, oh, you drove? Where's your car? And I went, over there in the parking lot. And they're like, oh, cool. Can we see your car?
No.
And I went,
No.
uh-huh. Because I don't know how to respond to police officers. So I go, yes, you can. So I turn and go, yes, officers, let's go look at my car. And again, really suspicious. But I did not have any other plan to cover it. And so we head back over towards my car. I'm just praying the whole time that Fish and the 21-year-old could pick up on my plan, and I was being nice and subtle. And as we get to my car, that is loaded with beer, luckily they had heard me, and they had thrown a blanket over all of the beer in the back.
Oh my god.
W, bro.
I know, and then they did shut the back of it, but that was all they had time to do, so by the time we got up there, they were both leaning against the back of my car.
So suspicious.
That was the issue. And as we walk up to it, I go, there's my car. And the officers go, evening, gentlemen. And they go, hi, officers. And the officers come up and they turn on the flashlights and they shine into the back, and you can see a blanket covering a whole lot of lumpy something. And the officers go, oh, so what's underneath the blanket?
Stuff for a picnic.
This is where me being witty, I go, car stuff. I was pretty proud of that one. And they go, car stuff? And I go, car stuff. And one of the officers goes, I like cars. Can I see your car stuff? No. And I go, no. Because I've not seen many TV shows, but I'm pretty sure I can say no. So I go, no. And he goes, really? And I go, no, because now I'm not quite as sure. He goes, well, I would really like you to open up the back of your car so I could look underneath that blanket and see your car stuff. And I go, no. He goes, well, I'm going to give you two options. He goes, one, you open up the back right now so I can lift up in that blanket and see your car stuff. And I go, the other option? And he goes, the other option is I suspect there might be something besides car stuff underneath there. So my friend and I are going to sit on your back bumper, and we're going to call a tow truck. And the tow truck is going to come and tow it down to the impound lot. Then we're going to call a locksmith, and the locksmith is going to come in and get into your car. And then we're going to open up the back, lift up that blanket, and take a look at what's underneath there. And if it's just car stuff, I will personally apologize and bring your car back. But if it's not car stuff, then we're going to come back and we're going to have to arrest you. And then you're going to have to pay for the impound, you're going to have to pay for the towing, and you're going to have to pay for the locksmith on top of everything else. I know it's not car stuff. So I know if I go down that route, it's going to be getting arrested plus spending a whole bunch of money versus just getting arrested. And I'm like, well, they both ended me getting arrested. So I go, okay. And I stepped up and opened up the back trunk. And I remember, to this day, the officers lifted it up, pulled back the blanket, and at the same time they both went, Jesus, that's a lot of beer. Not a good sign. That's never followed up with, and you boys have a good night. That is not what happened. And they both looked at the three of us and they go, whose car is this? And both Fish and the 21-year-old went, his, and pointed to me. I'll be honest, I considered not claiming my car. I considered just being like, no, found it, let's go, and just walking away. But I figured my parents would beat me, and I did not want that. So I go, that's my car. And they go, your car? Your alcohol? They looked over at Fish and the 21-year-old. They go, gentlemen, you're free to go.
What?
Because again, whoever owns the car owns the alcohol. And Fish and the 21-year-old went, really? And they go, unless you want to, and they were gone. Like running. And again, I had to have handcuffs put on me behind my back.
Oh, did they do the boat thing?
And so handcuffs, and I had to sit down on the little curb. I remember her sitting on the curb next to my car, and I could look up at the window as I was sitting there waiting because they had to have a cop car come and take me down to the police station. I could see all of my friends up there in the windows, and they all thought it was hilarious, and they're all waving at me because when your friend gets arrested for having alcohol, it's the funny thing apparently. And I remember I kept waving back to them with just one finger, as best I could. And I actually had to go down to the police station. I got fingerprinted. I actually had to get the little picture where you have like the thing holding in front of you. I would show it to you, but by the time I started doing these pictures, they'd already expunged all those things and it was gone. Otherwise, I would happily show you that picture. And so I actually had to go to rehab as an 18-year-old because when you get arrested for alcohol, the government makes you go to rehab classes. And I did not drink. And it was really weird going to rehab classes as someone who did not drink because they kept telling me, you have to admit you have a problem in order to get better. And I was like, I don't have a problem. And they were like, that's what everyone says. And that was the last time I got arrested. And I'm on a 30-year streak.